Having taken a DNA test, I found out that my wife is cheating on me with my own brother. So at a family party, I exposed them and humiliated them. Henry Johnson grew up in a chilly, uninviting household. His mother, Barbara, was emotionally distant, while his stepfather, Tim, provided the only warmth in his life. Tim, a kind-hearted trucker, treated Henry as his own son, despite not being his biological father. However, Barbara resented Henry, seeing him as a constant reminder of her past failures. This environment shaped Henry into a man determined to create a family that would never experience the coldness he felt as a child. Despite his mother's emotional distance, Henry found comfort in Tim's guidance. Tim taught him the values of hard work, respect, and love principles that Henry held dear as he grew up. In high school, Henry met Samantha, whom he believed would help him build the loving family he always dreamed of. They married young after Samantha became pregnant with their daughter Rachel. Henry joined the Army and later transitioned into a security career, all to provide the best life for his family. But the foundation of love and trust he worked so hard to build wasn't as strong as he had hoped. Henry never saw himself as extraordinary. His job as a security officer often involved enforcing rules, dealing with unruly individuals, and handling the associated paperwork. Despite the challenges, Henry found satisfaction in his work and took pride in supporting his family. Samantha, a beautiful woman with youthful looks, worked at a local bank and eventually became a bank manager after attending community college. Together, they provided a stable life for their daughter, Rachel. Henry and Samantha were both 19 when Rachel was born. With help from their families, they managed to care for Rachel and eventually moved into their own home. Henry served 4 years in the Army before landing a job with an armored truck service. Over time, he worked his way up to become the regional director for a large, well-known security company in the Northeast. Meanwhile, Samantha's career at the bank brought additional financial stability to the family. Rachel, now 18, was once the center of Henry's world, but their relationship grew strained as she got older. Since turning 13, Rachel had become increasingly rude to Henry, a change that deeply hurt him. He chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different. One incident that stood out was when Rachel was 13 and Henry asked her to go to bed. She responded with a defiant, "Why should I?" Another time, at 15, she publicly embarrassed him by yelling, "The only embarrassing thing is being around you," when he asked her to change a revealing outfit at a neighborhood party. Her Sweet 16 was particularly memorable for Henry. He worked tirelessly, pulling triple shifts and working back-to-back weeks to save up for a down payment on a used 2015 Chevy Malibu for her birthday. Despite all his effort, Rachel's reaction was dismissive. "Gee, thanks I guess, Dad." Henry was hurt by her ingratitude, and though he managed to hold back his anger, the memory lingered. Later, Rachel allowed a boyfriend to drive the car, which ended in a crash that totaled it. Though Henry was relieved she was unharmed, seeing the wrecked car brought him to tears, as all his hard work seemed wasted. Henry often found himself alone in disciplining their daughter, as Samantha never supported him. She would only intervene to excuse Rachel's behavior and criticize Henry. After a long day of work, Henry was heading home, but found some comfort in knowing he had saved up to surprise Samantha with a trip to the Bahamas for their anniversary. They had planned this trip for years, but never found the time. Henry loved his wife deeply and looked forward to surprising her. Driving home in his 2023 Chevrolet Camaro, Henry reminisced about how he, Samantha, and his friend would debate whether Ford or Dodge was better. Despite the challenges, he loved his wife and daughter and cherished his family. As he approached his house, he reflected on the struggles he'd faced, but felt grateful for his family. When he walked in, he saw Rachel coming down the stairs in a revealing outfit. Concerned, he asked, "Where are you going dressed like that?" Rachel, rolling her eyes, replied, "Going to the movies and then a house party in Greenville." "I told you." Henry, ignoring her attitude, responded, "You didn't mention a house party. If you had, I would have said no, and there's no way I'm letting you go out dressed like that. You're grounded." Rachel was outraged. "Grounded for what? My clothes?" Henry calmly explained, "It's not just the clothes. You're grounded because you're failing math despite my warnings and for skipping school to hang out with friends. That's why." Rachel's anger boiled over, and she spat, "You pathetic excuse of a man. Mom and I should have left you years ago." Without thinking, Henry backhanded Rachel, sending her onto the couch, Shocked by his own action, he stared at her with cold intensity. He then spoke firmly. "If you live under my roof, you follow my rules. I won't tolerate disrespect in my home. Do you understand?" Terrified, Rachel nodded. "Yes, sir. Good. You're grounded for 3 weeks. Now go to your room." Afterward, Henry went to the fridge for a beer, bracing himself for the argument he knew would come with Samantha. After finishing his drink, he knocked on Rachel's door. Hearing her small voice, he entered and saw she had been crying. Despite everything, she was still his daughter, and he loved her. "Honey, I'm sorry I slapped you. It shouldn't have happened. But when you called me a loser, something in me snapped. I love you, but I won't be disrespected in my own home. If something is bothering you, we need to talk about it. I'll always love you." Rachel, though still upset, didn't respond. Henry kissed her forehead and left the room. An hour later, Samantha sped into the driveway, furious. The moment she walked in, she demanded, "Who the hell do you think you are, slapping our baby like that, Henry?" Henry remained calm but firm. "Good evening, honey. Welcome home." "How was work today?" I asked, because you skipped greeting me as you often do lately. To answer your question, I'm her father, and while I love our daughter, I won't tolerate disrespect in the home I provide for our family. Samantha's eyes narrowed, irritated by Henry's firm stance. She took a breath and asked, "Rachel called me at work and said you slapped her. Is that true?" Henry read her expression before replying, "Yes, I did. I slapped her hard enough that she landed on the couch. She needed to understand that her behavior is unacceptable." Samantha was shocked, covering her mouth in disbelief. "So you're just going to slap our daughter around when she talks back?" Henry's anger grew, though he remained calm. "No, but I will discipline her when she disrespects us. Did she tell you why I slapped her, or did you just take her word for it?" Samantha looked down, unable to respond. Henry continued, "She was dressed inappropriately for a party she never mentioned and has been skipping school all week. Did you know that? The principal called me today, but you didn't check the missed calls or texts, did you?" Samantha admitted quietly, "No, I didn't." "At least you admitted that. But that's not why I slapped her. I did it because she called me a stupid, pathetic excuse of a man and said you both should have left me years ago." Samantha was stunned. "She said that to you?" "Yes. Our daughter said that to my face. This isn't the first time she's disrespected me, and you've always been there to shield her from the consequences. I'm not perfect, but I work hard for this family. I wake up at 4 a.m., work 60 hours a week, and handle endless complaints, contracts, and clients. Yet I still make time for every school event, every game, and I help with her homework. But when I discipline her for crossing a line, I'm the bad guy?" Samantha was speechless, seeing the pain and anger in Henry's eyes as he spoke. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm going for a drive. I need to clear my head." He left, leaving Samantha stunned in the living room. Henry drove aimlessly, needing to escape. He felt like an ATM or doormat to his family, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Suddenly, his phone rang. Expecting it to be Samantha or Rachel, he saw it was his mother. He answered, only to be met with her angry voice. "What in the hell is wrong with you?" "Hi, Mom. Don't hi Mom me. Samantha and Rachel just called. They said you struck Rachel and cursed out Samantha. Have you lost your mind?" "No, Mom, just my patience with them." With that, Henry hung up. Henry loved his mother to a point, but their relationship was strained. Linda had always been cold, never showing him love or compassion. His father had abandoned them when Henry was born, and Linda made it clear that she believed Henry was no good, just like his father. There was no nurturing bond between them, and she never hesitated to remind him of her low opinion of him. Henry's life changed when his mother met Tim Johnson when Henry was 1. Tim was a beacon of love for both Henry and Linda. Tim treated Henry as his own, teaching him life lessons, and even defending him when Linda was too harsh. Although Linda never showed Henry much love, the abuse eventually stopped, and they merely tolerated each other. Tim loved Henry so much that Henry took his last name after Linda and Tim married. They had a son, Paul, who became the golden child in Linda's eyes. Paul often used Henry to get out of trouble and took everything from him: friends, allowance, and affection. Only Tim treated both boys equally, loving and disciplining them fairly. Henry eventually grew distant, speaking mainly to Tim. When Henry's daughter Rachel was born, Tim was the only family member who supported both Henry and Samantha. Paul even tried to flirt with Samantha when Henry wasn't around, but Tim put a stop to it. Until his end of life, Tim's will surprised everyone, splitting 600 0.000 equally between Henry and Paul when they turned 24. Paul resented Henry for this, feeling entitled to the entire fortune because he was the biological son. Henry used his share to buy a house for his family after leaving the military. Returning to the present, Henry knew he had to go home. After watching the sunset at an old drive-in, he headed back. When he arrived, Samantha was waiting. She apologized for not considering his feelings about Rachel and admitted she often sided with their daughter, making Henry look like the bad guy. Henry smiled. "That's all I ask, honey. I love you and Rachel. You are my world. Just have my back and give me the respect I give you." Samantha responded, "I love you too, Henry." They kissed, and Henry pulled out 2 first-class tickets to the Bahamas, revealing his surprise anniversary trip. Overjoyed, Samantha jumped into his arms, kissing him nonstop. In the days that followed, things improved in the Johnson household. Samantha stopped undermining Henry and respected his role as the head of the family. Although Rachel still wasn't speaking much to Henry, her attitude improved. She stopped skipping school, and her grades began to recover. Even Henry's mother eased up on her nagging calls. Henry noticed his brother Paul visiting more often, which seemed to lift Rachel's spirits, but otherwise, things were going well. One day, while cleaning the house before their trip, Henry and Samantha were organizing the garage and attic. Rachel was upset about being left out of the trip, but kept her feelings to herself after their recent conflict. While working in the attic, Henry came across old photo albums, sparking nostalgia as he looked through childhood photos, wedding pictures, and memories of Rachel growing up. Just as he was about to put the photos away, he found a plastic bag containing a bundle of letters and a large brown envelope. As he read the contents, his heart sank, and his world shattered. The letter Henry found devastated him. "My dearest love, Paul, last night was magical. I've never felt anything like it. Your touch is like an artist creating a masterpiece, nothing compared to Henry. I just want you in my arms. Yours always, Samantha." Henry was crushed, realizing Samantha had been in love with Paul all along. "I've been married to her for over 20 years, and she does this to me?" he whispered as his world crumbled. He found more letters from Paul expressing love for Samantha and hinting at their affair, even mentioning that Rachel had Samantha's eyes. Then Henry discovered a DNA test proving Rachel wasn't his biological daughter. He felt betrayed and numb, wondering if his entire family knew the truth. Henry decided he needed proof. He took a hair sample from Rachel's comb for a DNA test, determined to uncover the full truth. He gathered himself, suppressing his rage, and planned his next steps. When he left the attic, he ran into Samantha, who asked where he was going. Henry controlled his anger and calmly lied, saying he needed supplies for the attic and would pick up dinner. Once out of the house, Henry called Martin Davis, a trusted private investigator who worked for his company. Martin was a former police officer who had left the force after a near-fatal ambush, dedicating his skills to private investigations instead. When Henry arrived at the office, Martin immediately sensed something was wrong. Henry broke down, explaining everything. Martin, who had a personal connection to a similar situation, was furious. He remembered a friend who had discovered his daughter wasn't his and lost everything in the fallout, leading to a tragic courtroom incident. Seeing Henry in such pain brought back those memories, and Martin took the situation personally, determined to help Henry get to the bottom of it. Henry, wiping his tears, stood up. "First, I need to confirm if Rachel is my daughter." He pulled out the bag with her hair. "Depending on the results, we'll decide what to do next. Second, I want to destroy them, not illegally, but in a way that makes them feel the pain and humiliation I'm experiencing." Martin smiled. "Let's get to work." He showed Henry a room full of surveillance equipment. "This is all legal, as long as it's used on your property or devices in your name. I'll need your permission to install everything." Henry agreed, signing the paperwork. "I'll get the cameras in place when no one else is home. You don't need to know where they are. Just trust me. They'll capture everything. I respect what you do, Henry, and I understand your pain." Feeling supported, Henry nodded. Martin also gave him the address of a DNA testing lab nearby, suggesting he could drop off the sample that day. Determined, Henry agreed. "Let's get this started." After leaving Martin's office, Henry called his lawyer and best friend, Chris Darwin. "Chris, I need to see you. Something serious has happened. Meet me at my office in an hour," Chris replied. When Henry arrived, Chris was shocked by his friend's appearance. What happened, Henry? Is Samantha and Rachel okay? Henry broke down, recounting the day's events. Chris was furious on Henry's behalf. They won't get away with this. Legally, you can monitor anything on your property or devices in your name. We'll access any deleted files and use everything you've gathered. The law is on your side if we prove infidelity, especially with the new state laws protecting the assets of the cheated party. Seeing his friend's despair, Chris added, I can't imagine what you're going through, but you need to protect yourself now. Henry, heartbroken, said, I loved her for over 20 years, and now it all means nothing. My own daughter, who might not even be mine, despises me, and my wife cheated with my brother, who hates me just for existing. Chris, moved by Henry's pain, assured him, Well, set things right. You stood by me when I needed help, and I'll do the same for you. The two friends embraced. As Henry drove home with the supplies, he reflected on the betrayal and pain he endured that day. He was determined to keep his knowledge of the affair hidden until he had all the facts. The thought of Rachel not being his daughter tormented him, but he braced himself for the DNA results, dreading what they might reveal. When Henry arrived home, everything seemed normal. Despite his contempt, he kissed his wife to avoid raising suspicion. They finished cleaning the house and had dinner together, but Henry felt like he was living in a sitcom, surrounded by actors instead of his real family. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Henry installed the hacking equipment on Samantha's and Rachel's phones following Martin's instructions. He texted Martin to confirm it was done, and within minutes, Martin responded, indicating the hacking had begun. By the end of the week, Henry would have the information he needed, whether he wanted it or not. The next day, after Rachel went to school and Samantha to work, Henry decided he needed a new outlet. He couldn't just sit around feeling broken. Remembering his childhood love of comic books, he searched for a comic book shop and found one called The Mischievous Quill. Stepping inside, memories of his childhood flooded back days spent with a friend, escaping life's troubles through comics and anime. That friend, however, had been lost to him for years, bringing a wave of sadness. At the cashier, Henry was stunned to see someone he never expected, Lily. Her eyes widened with recognition, and she greeted him with a huge smile. Henry, it's been ages. She hugged him tightly. It was the first time Henry had genuinely smiled since his ordeal began. Lily had come into Henry's life when he was a child during a tough time. On a Parents' Day, when his mother dismissed him harshly, he had run off to cry under a tree. Lily, a girl with red hair and blue eyes, approached him, offering kindness and inviting him to join her family's picnic. That simple gesture sparked a deep friendship that grew into love by the time they were in high school. However, Henry's brother Paul, who had a history of taking things from Henry, wanted Lily for himself. When she rejected Paul's advances and defended herself against him, it led to a series of events that forced Lily and her family to move away to avoid legal trouble. Lily had apologized for the chaos, but Henry had reassured her that she had done nothing wrong, blaming himself instead. In the park where they first met, they had held each other, expressing their love, even though life had torn them apart. Seeing Lily again brought back all those memories for Henry, reminding him of a simpler, happier time. Henry and Lily had always planned to wait until they were 18 at prom for their first time together, to make it special. Over the years, their love and friendship grew stronger, but when the day of Lily's move came, it felt like a part of them died. Henry, driven by Tim, gave Lily one last hug before watching her leave, knowing they might never see each other again. As the years passed, Henry met and married Samantha, building a family with her. Now, after all these years, he found himself reunited with Lily. Henry, I can't believe it's been so long, Lily said, tears in her eyes. Despite the years, she had grown into a beautiful woman, looking youthful at 34, with her short red hair, blue eyes, and tattoos. She still carried the charm that had captivated Henry. Lily, you look amazing, Henry replied, making her blush. They decided to catch up during Lily's break, heading to a cozy break room in the comic shop she owned. Henry was surprised and impressed. You own this place? How did that happen? Lily explained that after her parents died in a car accident, she discovered they had a life insurance policy and a trust from her grandparents, totaling $3 million. With her love for comics and a business background, she returned to town, bought the property, and turned it into her dream comic shop. living on the top floor. Henry was proud of her success. "You deserve this, Lily. I bet your guy is the luckiest in the world." Lily's smile faded, Hez out of the picture. "I caught him cheating, and he even had the nerve to be angry when I interrupted him. Thankfully, we didn't have kids, and I got out before things got worse." Henry, relating to her pain, shared what had happened to him recently. Lily hugged him tightly. "I'm here for you, whatever happens." Henry felt a warmth he hadn't experienced in a long time. As they parted, Lily invited him to visit again. "I'd like that," Henry said before driving off. On his way home, Henry received a text from Martin. "Meet me at Chris." Henry knew what this meant, and despite dreading what was to come, he headed there. Upon arrival, Chris' wife, Laura, greeted him warmly. "Henry, I'm so sorry about everything. We're here for you no matter what." Henry hugged Laura and thanked her before heading into the office where Martin and Chris awaited him with grim expressions. Martin began, "Henry, I'm sorry, but it's bad. We found more texts and videos. They've been having an on and off affair since Rachel was born, and there's more. The DNA test confirmed you're not Rachel's father." Henry, overwhelmed with pain and humiliation, broke down. Martin offered him a sip from his flask to steady him, then continued, "We also discovered that your mother and Rachel knew about the affair since Rachel was 13, around the time you noticed a change." Henry's heart broke as he read the document chats between Rachel and his mother expressing their hatred for him, their enjoyment of living off him, and plans to divorce him after Rachel graduated. They even discussed moving Paul into the house Henry paid for, and how his mother wished he had died instead of Tim. In shock, Henry muttered, "How could my own family hate me so much?" Chris and Laura offered comfort, with Laura reminding him, "Family isn't about blood, it's about actions. You saved Chris and me years ago, and you've been our family ever since. We love you, and we'll always be here for you." Henry, resolved, told Chris, "We go scorched earth." Chris nodded. "How do you want the paperwork sent?" Henry decided, "I'll deliver it to Samantha myself. She's expecting a surprise, and she'll get one when she and Rachel come home. I used to love my daughter, but now I can't even stand to hear her name." Chris agreed, asking about Paul. "I want him to get some bad news while he's at work," Henry replied. Chris smiled at the plan. "Consider it done." Henry then added, "I want something special for my mother. I'll deliver the divorce papers myself during Rachel's party in front of everyone. I want them all to see that Paul isn't the golden child they thought he was." Chris, initially surprised, supported the idea. "I'm on board." Henry maintained his composure, planning to keep up appearances until their anniversary trip. He'll confront Samantha then and decide what to do after. Everyone agreed, and Laura reminded him, "We love you and are here for you." On the day of the trip, Henry maintained the facade. The night before, Samantha initiated closeness, and Henry responded with aggression, treating her without affection. Afterward, Samantha, satisfied but shocked, asked, "What's gotten into you?" Henry coldly replied, "Just something I needed to get out of my system." As they prepared to leave, Paul and their mother, Janet, arrived. Paul smirked, making a comment about Rachel that nearly drove Henry to violence, especially when Paul hugged Samantha inappropriately. Henry restrained himself, knowing he needed to keep the element of surprise. He avoided his mother, knowing any interaction might raise suspicion. After loading the Camaro, they headed to the airport. As Henry gazed out at the island below, hearing the captain announce their landing, he thought about how he would confront Samantha and whether she would be honest with him. He planned to maintain the facade of a loving husband until then, hoping she would at least tell him the truth. The resort, called the Hidden Pearl, was stunning, with beautiful views, luxurious amenities, and perfect settings for couples. Knowing this trip marked the end of his marriage, Henry decided to make the most of it. He and Samantha enjoyed their time exploring trails, beaches, and nightclubs. On the second night, Samantha seemed happier than ever, and though Henry didn't love her anymore, he decided to be with her one last time. He used her for his own pleasure, feeling nothing, and resolved that it would be the last time. The next morning, Henry woke up and gently nudged Samantha awake. They cleaned up and went to breakfast. As they ate, Samantha said, "Henry, this trip has been amazing. I love you, and when we get home, things will be different." Henry calmly responded, "Samantha, on that we agree." He then pulled out a bundle from a Ziploc bag and placed it on the table. Samantha's face turned white. "Where did you find these?" "In the attic the day after you said you loved me," Henry replied. Samantha, realizing her nearly 20-year marriage was falling apart, began to cry. I can explain. It was a mistake." Henry laughed bitterly. "A mistake? Forgetting something at home is a mistake. Cheating and having your husband raise another man's child is a choice. At least own up to it." Through her tears, Samantha explained, "It started a year after we began dating. We had an argument and I was upset. Paul came over, comforted me, and we ended up having sex. It was supposed to be just once, but it continued on and off for years. I never meant to hurt you, Henry. I love you." "No, don't say that. You lost the right to use that word with me. Love requires loyalty and respect, which you clearly lack." Samantha cried harder, knowing she deserved his anger. Henry continued, "I saw the DNA test. I know Rachel isn't mine." Samantha gasped, and Henry continued, his voice harsh. "So not only did you betray me with my brother, but you made me raise his child, who treated me like dirt. Who is her father?" Henry already knew the answer, but wanted to see if Samantha had any dignity left to be honest with him. Despite everything, a part of him still loved her. But he couldn't stay in a marriage built on lies. Henry asked, his voice cold and demanding, "What is his name, Samantha?" Samantha hesitated before replying, I can't tell you. I'm sorry." Henry didn't respond, just stared at her with a blank expression. He put money down for their drinks, canceled the meal, and walked away without a word. Samantha ran after him, but he ignored her. Back at the hotel, Henry started packing without speaking to her. Realizing he was done with her, Samantha packed as well. Henry caught an earlier flight, leaving Samantha to arrive home 2 hours later. When Henry got home, he found Paul waiting with a smug grin. Before Paul could speak, Henry confronted him. "I know everything about you and Samantha. Get out of my house before I smash your face into my coffee table." Terrified, Paul left immediately. Henry then moved his belongings from the master bedroom to the basement, which he had previously set up as a guest apartment. Samantha watched, realizing too late that her actions had likely ended their marriage. The next day, Henry met with Martin, Chris, and Laura to discuss the trip and his next steps. He instructed them to prepare everything for Rachel's 18th birthday party at the Grand Eagle Hotel. Martin would serve as Henry's personal security that night. Martin revealed more dirt on Paul, including sexual harassment claims and shady business practices. He assured Henry that the women were ready to testify against Paul. Impressed, Henry suggested a promotion for Martin, which brought some lightness to the meeting. But as Henry left, his resolve hardened. He was done shedding tears, now he had a purpose. Knowing Rachel was out with his mother and Paul, Henry waited for their return, sitting in the living room with a glass of brandy. When Rachel arrived, she sneered, "Finally, I can leave that loser in this dump." Samantha tried to correct her. "That loser loves you and raised you. Show sure." Here's the continuation. "Show some respect," Samantha tried to correct Rachel. Rachel rolled her eyes and replied, "Oh, please. You've been with my real dad since I was born. It's too late for respect. That loser kept me from Ronnie, and I hate him for it." From the shadows, Henry spoke up. "Rachel, why don't you tell me how you really feel?" Both women froze in terror as they realized Henry had overheard everything. "Henry, it's not what you think," Samantha tried to explain. "She just misspoke." "No, she said exactly what she meant," Henry replied, stepping closer. The women huddled together as he continued. "I know everything, Samantha. I know Rachel isn't my daughter, but Paul's. I know my mother knew about the affair since Rachel was 13. You told Rachel I was having an affair and that Paul was comforting you, all to cover up your own shame." Henry turned to Rachel. "I don't know what I did to make you hate me, Rachel. I loved you with all my heart. I was there for you when Tommy broke up with you, when you were sick, when you started school. I promised to protect you and show you love, unlike what I experienced from my mother." Rachel began to cry as Henry continued. "When you were in that car accident, all I cared about was getting to you, hoping you weren't hurt." Henry then looked at Samantha and asked coldly, "Did you and Paul laugh every time you took him to our bed?" Samantha went pale. Before she could respond, Henry added, "I have video evidence." He turned on the TV to show footage of Samantha and Paul together in their marital bed. "You spied on me?" Samantha asked, irritated. "Are you seriously upset that I recorded you cheating in our bed?" Henry shot back. Samantha stammered, I can explain. We can work through this. Oh God, no, Henry cut her off. This wasn't a mistake, Samantha. It was a choice, over and over again. You slept with my brother, had his child, and made me raise her as mine. Rachel flinched at Henry's cold words. Henry finished his drink, washed the glass, and reflected on how his marriage was going down the drain. As he put on his jacket and headed for the door, Samantha yelled, "Where are you going? We need to talk. This is a family." Henry scoffed. "What family? Did you not hear what I just said? I'm leaving because I can't stand the sight of either of you." He slammed the door and drove off, needing to escape at 10 p.m. He didn't want to go to a bar, he wanted to be with a friend. He knew just where to go. Lily was at home with her two new German Shepherd puppies, Lady and Gunner. She had always wanted to be a mother, but bad relationships had left her alone. These puppies were now her companions. When she heard her buzzer, she saw Henry on the door camera and let him in. When Henry arrived, he was heartbroken. Without saying a word, he held on to Lily and cried, finally releasing all the pain and anguish he had been holding in his family's betrayal, the discovery of the affair, and the heartbreak of it all. Lily comforted Henry as she had done years ago, holding him as he cried without any shame. She gently stroked his head and whispered, "It's okay, honey. I'm here." When he finished, Henry shared what had happened. "I feel like a joke, like I've been hit by a car and everyone is laughing, especially the people who were supposed to be my family." Lily, having been through her own heartbreak, understood his pain. "Look at me, Henry," she said softly. Henry looked up, tears in his eyes. "No matter what, I'm here for you, just like before." Henry managed to smile. "Good seeing you again, partner." Lily smiled back. "Yeah, it is, partner. I have a guest room ready for you. You should get some rest. I doubt your wife will mind given the situation." Sarcastic but genuine, Henry chuckled. "No, she won't." Before heading to bed, Henry hugged Lily. "Thank you, Lily, for everything." Lily smiled and kissed his cheek. "You do the same for me." "Good night, Henry." "Good night, Lily," Henry replied as they both went to their rooms, old feelings starting to resurface. The next morning, Henry woke to the smell of bacon and eggs. Entering the living room, he saw Lily cooking, her two puppies by her side. "Good morning, handsome. Hope you don't mind Spam, onions, and cheese in your eggs." "Got bacon and toast, too," she said warmly. "Sounds perfect." "They say hunger is the best spice," Henry replied, grateful his old girlfriend still knew her way around the kitchen. Lily playfully tossed a dish rag at him. "Doubting my skills, sir?" "Not at all, madam," Henry responded, both of them laughing as they enjoyed breakfast. Lily asked, "What are you going to do now?" Henry thought for a moment. "At first, I thought we could work it out, but after seeing those letters, chats, and video snow, there's no fixing this. I moved my things to the basement, but eventually, I want them out of my house. Rachel's 18 now, so she's not my responsibility. I'm planning to sue Paul for child support and alienation of affection. And I have something in mind for my mother, too." Lily nodded, understanding his determination. "I want to be there for you, like we used to be." "You already are, Lily. More than you know," Henry replied, both feeling the tension between them. Henry's phone rang. It was Rachel. Reluctantly, he answered, "What do you want?" "Dad, I'm sorry about everything. You weren't supposed to find out like this," Rachel said, her voice shaking. "First of all, I'm not your father, so don't call me that." "And how exactly was I supposed to find out?" Henry responded bitterly. Rachel hesitated, then asked, "Well, as you know, I want to go to college. How are you going to handle the payments? School is expensive." Henry was stunned by her entitlement. Lily waved her hand in front of his face to snap him out of it. Slowly, Henry responded, "Let me get this straight after you and your mother show me how unappreciated I am and reveal that I've been raising another man's child, a child who hates me. You have the nerve to ask me to pay for your college?" Rachel, unfazed, replied, "Just do it already. You're legally my dad, so you're obligated to help me." "Screw you," Henry snapped. "You're an adult now, and I'm not obligated to do anything. If you want to go to college, ask your real dad to pay for it. Don't ever contact me again." He hung up and blocked her number. Turning to Lily, Henry said, "I need to get things started." Neither Henry nor Lily could deny the feelings between them. Their eyes met, filled with desire, and soon they were kissing, genuine, passionate, and full of love. Suddenly, Henry pulled back, stopping the kiss. "Lily, I'm sorry, you're hurting, and I took advantage." "I should have." Lily gently placed a finger on his lips. "You have nothing to apologize for, Henry. It's clear our feelings never really went away, just took a long nap. Lily, I love you. I never stopped, Henry confessed, his voice filled with emotion. He brushed her hair aside and wiped away a tear. But I respect you, Lily, and my vows. I need to give Samantha the divorce papers first. That happens tonight. If you want us to be together, please respect my wish to stay faithful until this is over. If that's too much, I understand. Lily kissed his cheek. I've waited over 17 years. I can wait a little longer. They hugged, and for the first time in a while, Henry felt hope. He left, showered, and prepared for Rachel's birthday party at the hotel. As he dressed, he realized there was no point in dwelling on the past. He could only move forward. When he arrived home, workers were preparing for the party. Oh great, Rachel's birthday. Just what I needed, he thought. His phone rang, and seeing the caller ID, Henry sneered. He thought about ignoring it, but remembered his phone was tapped for evidence. You piece of crap, what have you done? Paul's voice screamed through the phone. Henry played dumb. Hello, Paul. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I got called into HR today. OSHA and the Department of Labor were there with my supervisor. 3 women filed complaints against me, and this time it stuck. I'm suspended. This isn't supposed to happen, Paul ranted. Henry's voice turned cold. If by fun you mean harassing them, then this is exactly what should happen. Paul paused, realizing he had revealed too much. His tone became venomous. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm your brother, Paul. I'm the guy whose wife you screwed. How could you do that to me? You've hated me my whole life. Why? Paul continued coldly. You were born. Dad loved you, even though you weren't his. That time with him should have been mine. You were perfect good grades friends. I was just your little brother. So when I had the chance to take Samantha, I did. I made her feel alive while you were focused on your own life. We had sex while you were in boot camp, and I laughed at turning you into a loser. His voice filled with arrogance, Paul added, I don't know how you messed with my job, but if I get fired, I'll liquidate you. Understand? Henry smiled, grateful for the recorded evidence. I hear you loud and clear, Paul. Paul tried to regain control. Good. Now you'll go to the party with Samantha and Rachel. You'll play the happy husband and keep up appearances. Do we understand each other, Crystal? Henry replied calmly. Paul hung up, thinking he'd intimidated his brother, but Henry laughed, knowing Paul had just handed him enough evidence to press serious charges, including parental fraud and alienation of affection. Initially, Henry planned to skip the party, but now he saw an opportunity. Time to show the world my loving and caring family, he thought with a smile. Henry arrived at the hotel in his freshly polished Camaro, handing the keys to a valet who admired the car. Henry joked, careful with the drool. I just had it waxed. The valet, embarrassed, started to apologize, but Henry gave him a 100 tip. It is a nice car. Thanks for appreciating it. Can you park it close to the exit? I don't think I'll be staying long. The young valet smiled and agreed to Henry's request. Inside, Henry found the ballroom to be extravagant, with a beautiful sculpture in the center and a bar nearby. Waiters served drinks to those over 21, identified by purple bracelets, while a DJ played music for the dancing crowd. Henry had to admit it was an impressive setup. He soon spotted his lawyer, Chris, and his PI, Martin. Martin blended in by wearing maintenance clothes, while Chris was dressed in a sharp suit. Henry briefed them on the situation and instructed them to set up the equipment. If anyone asks, you're just part of the staff, he said. Guests began to arrive, including Samantha, Rachel, and his mother, Janet. Janet, always vain, looked as polished as ever, but her character remained rotten. When she saw Henry, she sneered, So you finally came to your senses and showed up for Rachel's special day. At least you did something right. Henry ignored her and mingled with the other guests, which included Rachel's friends, her boyfriend, relatives, and even his grandfather. His grandfather, though in his 80s, still commanded respect, especially from Janet, who was on her best behavior around him. The party went smoothly, with dancing, drinks, and lively conversation. When it was time for birthday speeches, Paul arrived just in time, smirking at Henry as he passed by. Samantha avoided Henry, clearly ashamed, while his mother looked at him with disdain as usual. As Rachel began her speech, she glanced at Henry with clear disdain. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Applause followed, and Henry took a sip of his drink. Martin leaned in and whispered, Everything's ready. Nice move making this an 18 and up party. Henry smiled. Yeah, it was. Rachel continued, her smile turning cruel. Family isn't just about blood. My own dad, for example, doesn't want to support my dream of becoming a nurse. He's punishing me for his argument with my mom. What kind of father does that? The mood turned tense as judgmental stares focused on Henry, but Henry remained calm. Then he began to clap slowly as he walked to the center of the room. Brilliant. My daughter, everyone. That's rich, he said sarcastically. The room fell silent, all eyes on Henry. He began, I traveled 1,500 miles to see my daughter born. From that moment, I vowed there was nothing I wouldn't do for her. She was my heart, my sun, and my moon. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Henry then revealed a remote and played a projector displaying messages that exposed Rachel's knowledge that Henry wasn't her father, her manipulation, and her role in hiding her mother's affair with Paul. The screen showed how she called Paul daddy and mocked Henry behind his back. Rachel was horrified. And now, Henry continued, let's talk about my wife. I loved her since high school, gave her everything. But while I was serving our country, she was having an affair with my brother. Henry played a video showing his wife and brother having sex in their marital bed, with his brother mocking him during the act. He also displayed chat logs and videos revealing their plans to drain his funds and kick him out of his own home through divorce. They openly professed their love for each other, treating Henry as a mere inconvenience. Samantha screamed in shock and shame when she saw the evidence. Henry walked over to her and handed her a vanilla envelope. I want a divorce, Samantha, he said coldly. I sold the house too. It's in my name, and since we're in an at-fault state, you have no say. The locks have been changed, and you have until the end of the week to collect your things. I'm being more generous than you deserve. You can keep your $401k, and we split the marital assets. I sold the house for $2,000, so you have some money for groceries and gas. I want nothing to do with a place filled with lies, and I want nothing to do with you. What you did was selfish and cruel. You let my brother screw you and had me raise his daughter, who took joy in being cruel to me. Henry's voice hardened. If you fight me, I'll destroy you with the evidence I've shown and more that I haven't. You'll lose everything, and Paul will have to sell you off to make rent. Maybe your daughter can wash dishes while you sell yourself to get by. You promiscuous Samantha fled the ballroom in embarrassment, with her daughter following. Henry continued to address the stunned crowd. Now let's talk about my blood-related family, he said. Rachel was right. Blood doesn't make you family. Meet my brother, Paul. Besides being a wife-stealing dirtbag, let's start from the beginning. I'm a year older than Paul. I was raised by a man named Tim Johnson, Henry said, as photos of Tim filled the screen. He's the only one in my family who truly loved me. My biological father left before I was born. Tim raised me as his own, and I'm who I am today because of him. Then Paul was born. I don't know why he hated me so much, or why he betrayed me by having me raise his child, but I'll let him explain. Henry then played the recording of his earlier conversation with Paul, revealing Paul's jealousy, his wish for Henry's death, and his belief that Henry had no right to their father's love or money. Paul even threatened to eliminate Henry. Henry turned to his brother. You don't need to worry about being my brother anymore because as far as I'm concerned, you were dead to me the moment I found out you were screwing my wife. Paul lunged at Henry, but Henry ducked and knocked him with a strong punch to the ribs, causing Paul to collapse. Martin, acting as security, quickly handcuffed Paul. You're being detained until the police arrive, for both your safety and mine, Martin said. Paul groaned in pain, struggling to stay conscious. Henry handed him an envelope. You've been served, prick. Paul glared at Henry with pure hatred as Henry walked back to the center of the room. He then turned his attention to his mother. And now my mother. Let's just call her Janet because boy does she hate me. She knew about the affair and was perfectly fine with me being betrayed by her favored son. He displayed images of Janet's chats and videos openly supporting Paul and Samantha's affair, along with conversations where she and Rachel criticized Henry. The crowd's disdain for the family grew even stronger, but Henry wasn't done. He pulled out a brown leather diary, and Janet's face went pale. Mom kept a diary since I was born. According to her, my father was a selfish dirtbag who ran when he found out she was pregnant. But that's not entirely true, Henry continued. I did some digging and found out my real father was Alex Thompson. Alex and Janet met in high school, and during their senior year, Janet decided she wanted kids. Alex, however, made it clear he wasn't ready and always insisted on using protection, even asking Janet to be on the pill. But Janet lied, telling Alex she was on the pill because he trusted her. They were planning to get married until she got pregnant. Janet was thrilled, thinking she'd finally have her happy family. But Alex's powerful parents didn't like the idea of their son being trapped. They hired top lawyers to tell her she could keep the baby, but she'd be raising it alone. Henry paused, observing the crowd's reaction, then continued. Alex signed away his parental rights, shattering Janet's dream of a perfect family. From that moment, she truly hated me, even before I was born. She wanted to get rid of me, but my wealthy grandfather stepped in and threatened to disinherit her. So she had me, though she didn't even want to hold me after I was born. And here's the kicker, Henry continued, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Janet had a neighborhood friend who would visit when Dad wasn't home. Yes, she cheated on him. The room grew silent as Henry spoke. He continued, "One day, I saw her friendlets call him Rusty. Rusty liked hanging out with me, particularly when Mom or Dad wasn't in the room. One day, Rusty came into my room when I was asleep. Anyway, I woke up to see Rusty with his hand touching me in ways no child should be touched. The crowd gasped in horror, but Henry remained composed, his voice unwavering. When I told my mom about it, she slapped me and threatened to send me away where no one, not even Tim, could find me. She accused me of lying. I always thought mothers were supposed to protect their kids, but I got the opposite." People in the audience began to cry, some wiping away tears as they listened to Henry's harrowing account. He shed a few tears himself, but his voice remained steady. "Now you're probably wondering why you should believe me. Watch the screen." The screen behind him lit up with videos and recordings backing up Henry's story. There were his father's accounts, Janet's own words expressing her regret and hatred, and diary pages confirming everything. The crowd grew somber, with many crying for what Henry had endured, while others looked on with disdain for his family. Henry approached his mother, who now looked completely shattered. "I had no choice in being born, and the only real family I had wasn't even related by blood. But I want you out of my life for good. No more calls, no more texts. And when you take your last breath, I want you to know you'll die alone. If you weren't so full of hate, you could have been surrounded by love and people who cared. But now, the only ones around will be those waiting to take your body away." Janet was speechless, her face pale and her eyes wide with disbelief. Henry placed the microphone back on its stand and addressed the crowd one last time. "Thanks for coming, everyone. Have a good night." As the police arrived to take Paul away, Henry turned to Samantha and Rachel, who stood together, frozen in shock. "We have nothing left to discuss. We are no longer family in any sense of the word. If you have any questions, talk to my lawyer. I want you both out of my house and take that mother-in-law of yours with you." Janet, regaining a fraction of her composure, tried to insult him. "You sorry excuse for a man. The moment you walk out of here, you're no son of mine." Henry looked at her with a cold expression and said, "I gladly take that role." He then turned and flipped her off, walking away with a sense of finality. As he left the ballroom, Henry thanked Martin with a hug and handshake. "Thanks for everything." Martin smiled. "If I could get some PTO out of this, I'd appreciate it." Henry grinned. "Consider your 2 weeks vacation approved. Just let us know when you want to use it." Martin nodded, then asked, "Are you going to be all right? Something tells me you don't want to be around here. Do you have somewhere to go?" Henry nodded. "Yeah, I've got a place." Later that night, Lily was at home with her 2 puppies when she heard the buzz of her apartment door. Seeing it was Henry, she let him in without a word. They embraced and kissed with a passion they hadn't felt in years. That night they made love, finally releasing the emotions they had kept bottled up for so long. The next morning, Henry woke up with Lily lying on his chest. When she woke, she smiled and kissed him. "Good morning, sleepyhead." "Good morning, beautiful," Henry replied as she lay on his chest. Lily asked, "How did last night go?" Henry sighed. It felt like watching a beautiful lie die, but for once, the truth is actually better than the lie could ever be. Lily kissed him gently. "I love you, Henry. I never want to lose you again." "I'll fight to keep that from happening," Henry said, holding her close. But then he added, "I have a bit of a problem." Lily looked concerned. What is it? Henry sighed. I sold my house and found myself homeless. Could I stay here for a while? It won't be long, I promise. I just need to… Before he could finish, Lily kissed him repeatedly. Stay as long as you want. You don't even have to ask. They laughed together, their passion for each other growing as they spent the day in each other's company. Over the next week, Henry started his new life. He moved his belongings from the house, leaving Samantha's and Rachel's things in a storage container in front of the house. One day, on his way back to Lily's from work, Henry got a call from Chris. Henry, it's Samantha. She says she'll sign whatever you want, no questions asked, but she insists on speaking to you first. Henry thought it over. He didn't really need Samantha's cooperation. He could crush her in the divorce and his threats weren't empty. But he realized he just wanted her out of his life completely. He wanted to start fresh with Lily, the love he thought he'd lost long ago. Still in his 30s, he wanted to spend his time with someone who loved and respected him, and he wanted to do it right. Okay, Chris, let me know when and where to meet her. The next day, Henry met with Chris in his office. Samantha and her lawyer were ready to sign the papers. Despite her lawyer's objections, Samantha agreed to sign if she could speak to Henry first. Once the lawyers left the room, Samantha broke the silence after 2 minutes. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I'm truly sorry. You may not believe it, and I don't blame you, but I do love you. I can't justify what I did to you or how I let Rachel treat you. Henry looked at her. Was it something I did or didn't do? Samantha almost shouted, No, God, no, Henry, this is all on me. She then called the lawyers back in and signed the papers, tears in her eyes. She told Henry that Rachel would stay with her and apologized one last time before walking out of his life for good. 3 months later, Henry received a call from an unknown number. It was a lawyer asking to meet. They met at Chris' office. Hello, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm here to inform you that your grandfather, Michael Richards, has disinherited your mother based on the events of that night. He instructed me to deliver this message, as he is unable to speak due to his condition. The lawyer paused, then read from a letter. My dear grandson, I'm so sorry I didn't protect you from what you went through. I was angry with your mother, but I had no idea you suffered so much. She kept me from you, and that stopped us from building a stronger bond. I'm leaving you my trust of $500 million. Use it wisely to build rather than destroy. Your mother was once entitled to it, but given recent events, I'm giving you her share as well. I wish we could have gone fishing one last time. Those moments were some of the best of my life, and I thank you for them. I was proud of you the day you wore the same uniform as I did, and the day you provided for what you believed was your family. May this gift help you start a new chapter with a real family. I love you, Henry Johnson, and I'm proud of the man you've become. Sincerely, your old man. Henry shed tears, not because of the money, but because someone other than Tima blood relative truly loved him. He had thought his grandfather stopped seeing him because he didn't care, but it was his mother who had kept them apart. He shared the news with Lily, who was happy for him, but then she surprised him. We're getting you a prenup as soon as possible, she said. If we get married, Henry was about to respond, but she held up her hand. Henry, I love you, and I know you love me, but you deserve someone trustworthy and loyal. Let me do this to show you I'm in love with my soulmate, not his wallet. Henry smiled. Okay, beautiful, but I picked the dinner on our honeymoon. Lily kissed him. Deal.